And good afternoon or good morning. Doesn't matter. I guess it depends where you're from. We can get this stream started. Let me just remove a few things I don't want to look at. This is good. I just want to move this here so I can see the chat. Good morning, Doug, and good morning, Graham, or good afternoon. And welcome to my stream. I just had a glitched stream for some reason. It didn't want to stream to YouTube for some reason. So I made sure it works now. Excellent. It works on both on YouTube and Twitch. So we are good to go. Just see, is the sound okay? The music is not too loud. Everything looks fine. The video is fine, I guess. Again. Excellent. Cool. I guess we can kick it off. Let me just grab what I need here from this. Not that. I need something else. I need this. Excellent. So, welcome to today's streams. My name is Darko, and today I will be having a look at, or I will be trying to have a look at AWS Config. So, AWS Config is one of the services which doesn't get talked about enough. So, I will try to explain it a bit more in a very simple approach today. Graham says, good session for Dev Day. Thank you very much. Today we had a Dev Day. So my colleagues and I had a big old webinar series today happening. So we had a lot of viewers, and I'm super happy about that. And I like that that people have been coming on to that to listen to us talk. Cool. So just one more second. I just need to throw something up here. That is good. Excellent. Okay, so what are we going to be talking about today? I mentioned config, but config is part of a larger thing, or a larger concept, or a larger topic we need to address. And this might not be the sexiest topic of them all when talking about a streaming thing. So, we need to talk about governance and compliance. Yeah. It's that topic, but it's very important because here's the thing. A lot of customers I talk to, especially small companies, they say, you know what, we don't care that much about, some governance features, or we are not up to that size yet. We're not big enough for all of these governance, compliance policies and those things. Here's the thing. If you don't have proper governance in place, you will never be a successful large entity. So if you are starting small, that's fine, but you still need to have both governance and respect of compliance to kind of help you grow in the long run. So what does that mean? So I need to explain first what the two terms are, both governance and compliance, because I keep using that term quite a lot, but not a lot of people know what it is. So first of all, what is governance? Governance is this was told to me by my colleague Brian who was here last time. He told me governance is how did he call it? He told governance is the things you have decided to do. So those are rules, regulations, decisions you have decided to follow. Let's say my decision in my company was to never use, never open port 22 to the external world. Now, that is a security governance thing, but it's also a general governance thing. So this is a rule I have decided I want to implement within my organization. And that's one of the parts that will help me grow or help me be more in control, right? Another example of governance would be we must have a logging account. All the logs must be funneled to a centralized account. That's a governance thing. Now, these things you have chosen to follow. So this is not something that somebody came to you, hey, Darko, from tomorrow on, your company must funnel the logs in a central location. No, this is something I have decided to do as a company owner, as a business owner. But compliance is something that was given to you as a part of a regulatory package. So, from local government compliance requirements such as data residency, for example, that's a compliance thing. Or I used to work for a company where we had a compliance requirement to meet the ISO 27001 certification. We needed to have the history of every user account created, for who it was created, why, when it was deleted, where is the data. So that's a compliance thing which we didn't choose ourselves to do, but it was a compliance thing that was given to us. Now, why I'm talking about all of these things, it can be difficult to track or to keep in control all these governance and and compliance requirements in check at the cloud scale. So the company I used to work for was a small company based in Malta. Well, they're not small, but we were a small outfit. And keeping track of user creations was a simple thing. Literally, we would print out the user creation sheets on a piece of paper and keep them in a big binder, right? Which is perfectly fine. It's plausible for a company that has 50 people. But when you grow to an extent of thousands of servers, maybe thousands of employees, not even counting employee count, right? Let's have a look. Let's think of it. Imagine if your compliance requirement was that you need to have a specific log configuration, right? I mentioned centralized logging. I told it is a governance thing. It's something we have decided to do. But let's say that it's not just something you decided to do, but the government tells you have to do that, or a regulatory body tells you, hey, your logs must be sat in a specific location. In that case, how do you know is that being followed across thousands of instances, thousands of AWS accounts? We talk here about cloud scale. How do you know all of that? So, and actually Config is this tool which helps you greatly in that. And I advise to all people who have a relatively simple setup in the beginning to think about using Config or tools similar as such to help them grow, help them keep that in check. Because we don't want to have a runaway cloud. We don't want to have this thing that balloons out of proportion, and then at the end of the day, nobody's able to wrangle it and control what it does and what it doesn't do. So tools such as Config help us actually in doing all of those things. So in essence, what is Config? It's a service that enables you to assess, audit, and evaluate AWS configurations. So it supports configuration, evaluation, and auditing for certain AWS services. It doesn't support all resources, not by far, but for certain very important things, it does. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you're a financial institution. It's a compliance tool. Essentially, yes, Graham. It's a compliance tool. It's not just it's an audit and compliance tool. It gives you the ability to track those changes, monitor the current configuration, and also it gives you the ability to automatically remediate things. So for example, you're a business that does something with finances, or you require strict security. And the thing that will not make you compliant is opening port 22 towards the internet, right? And how do you control that? Well, you control that by using security groups. But how do you prove that? So what you can have a config setting or item, which I'll show later on, that basically checks, are all of your security groups closed on port 22. And if by some chance one of them somebody opens it, Config can automatically remediate those things. It can actually run automation to say, you know what, this security group has been opened, shut it down, right? So those kind of things. So and today we will be going through how can we do some basics configuration and settings on Config. And who should use this? I mean, that's a very important question. Who should use this? Well, everybody. Even as I said, even if you're starting out small, you should think about using tools such as AWS Config to keep track of what you have and what you do. Because I had my AWS account for the past a bit more than 4 years, as long as I work here. I have all sorts of things in my account. I am not controlled what I do. And the thing is, you try something, you do this, you do that, you lose track of how it's configured, what it does. So Config can kind of help you evaluate those things, set some rules in place. Now, it doesn't have to cover everything, right? Set rules you have decided to run, so your governance, or set the rules that you need to follow, such as compliance, and it will basically give you an example of it will show you, are you compliant or not, or are you following your governance rules or not. But actually, let's get into it. Enough of me standing on my soapbox and talking about this. let's switch that. Excellent. So let's kick it off. All right, so what the first thing we need to do? Let me actually switch to my MacBook like that. So where is this? Cool. Excellent. So to get to config, as anything else, just type config. It will take you to the config dashboard. Now config is configured in this case per region. And there's a new console available, and this thing is very much bothering me. I don't know how to turn it off. If I give it a rating, right? So if I do this and close it off, every time I refresh it will come back. So I need to speak to the config UI folks. So there's a few things we need to think about, we need to look at when we talk about config, right? So first of all, let's actually switch to the new console. It's prettier. See, jumps up again. I don't know why. Okay, so first of all, we need to have recording on. So we need to enable config. By default, I don't think it's enabled by default. To be fair, it's been so long since I created my AWS account that I don't know, is it enabled by default? I think it's not. So in any case, enable config. But also, you also define which which resources will config monitor. Now, it can configure all supported resources within the region. And in general, that might be cool, but you might not need to monitor all the things, right? So for the list of supported resources, we can actually have a look here. Click here. We will see all the regions and, well, what it is actually supported on these resources. So these things we can actually monitor. But in my use case, what I did is I've actually selected just an EC2 security group. So because I want to illustrate a very simple example on how to monitor a relatively benign thing, but at the end of the day, it can be very useful to monitor these things. So how do you select a security group? Well, you can select. You might not have three options here. You might not have Darko's resources or Darko resources, because Darko resources come from CloudFormation. It's the custom registry thing I've actually done on stream. Have I done it on stream? No, I've done it on my talk. This is where you would cover the custom registry thing. But if I go to AWS resources, or in general all resources, and I can do here and pick which resources to support. So I will just do security group, like so. And you have to do, hey Dennis, hi. You can also select the data retention period. Now, this is very important because depending on where you are and what kind of compliance you adhere to, the retention might be different, right? So some entities require you to have some maybe longer than 7 years or a shorter period, so you want to kind of control those costs. But depending on where you are, you might need to set this retention period to a certain date. And this, in essence, the config data, or the data coming from config, the data that is collected by config, will be stored within S3. So these are the costs that might exist. So I will select just for 7 years. Why not? It's the default one, but I can also configure a custom one. You need a role for this, right? So I have a role already existing. So there's a predefined role as well that you can be using, or it will create a policy. It will attach a policy to a role you define it to. S3 bucket, again, I chosen an S3 bucket here, and just this bucket is sitting within my account, and it's funneling this data into my S3 bucket. Now you can also funnel stuff into a different account, which makes sense. I talked about multi-account approaches. So if you have a bunch of accounts from all the things you might use, you might want a centralized config account where you funnel all the information and use it from there. And if I click save, it will save it all, and it will start collecting, or it will start gathering inventory on security groups, right? So I will not click save because I already did. So recording is on. It's collecting EC2 security groups. The data retention period is 7 years. It's putting it in this S3 bucket. It's not sending anything to SNS. It can also do things to SNS, but I'm not opting to do that right now. So if I go to dashboard, you can see that I have a total of 25 security groups in my AWS account. So in this region, in this account. So within the EU West 1 region, I have 25 security groups, and you can see them all there. And they're compliant. Now, what does compliant mean? Now, they wouldn't be compliant if I didn't have a rule set, but I have a rule defined that I am using here to kind of check these things out. And this is very important. So when it comes to rules, let me actually get you the exact definition of what a rule is. So use AWS Config to evaluate your configuration settings of your AWS resources. You do this by creating AWS Config rules, which represent your ideal configuration settings, right? So there's a bunch of managed rules. So rules exist. Basically, rules are your tests. Think of these as unit tests for your configuration, right? So they test your infrastructure, your resources, are they compliant or not? And we have a whole bunch of built-in rules. So if I go to rule and I click add rule and select an AWS managed rule, there's 119 AWS managed rules, right? So for example, this is a great rule, making sure that your keys are rotated or not, right? So this gives you, this rule checks that a key is of a specific max age, right? So it checks, are all of your IAM keys rotated in time, right? And this rule that I pulled for myself is restricted common ports. And I just added telnet. Now, this is a built-in rule, which you can define, in this case, 5 blocked ports. What I've done here is I've created a rule that blocks port 21. So if any of my security groups, any of these 25s had port 21 opened on them, they would be tagged as non-compliant. And config would basically scream at me right here to do that. Yes, Graham, yes. To do your own custom rules, you basically do Lambda functions, and we're going to do that as well. So I'm going to create a custom rule just after I show you this. So we can see here that we have 0 non-compliant rules and 0 non-compliant resources, which is pretty cool. And if I go to, let's try to make ourselves non-compliant. So go to EC2, like that, and find what would be the best way. So VPC, and then security groups. Where are you? Let me pick this one. Let's add a new rule saying custom TCP port 21. And what is port 21? The most secure port. It's telnet. So yeah, don't use telnet unless you have to. I actually worked with a friend not so long ago. His company still uses telnet. Believe it or not, that's it's 2020, and telnet is something I wouldn't try to do. Now, I have made a change, and let's see what happens right now. So if I refresh this, we still see that nothing has happened yet, right? So we have not yet collected inventory. So it might take a moment or so for this thing to run again. Can I rerun it? Yeah, I can reevaluate. So I can run reevaluation of my rules, and go to dashboard, and with a bunch of refreshes, I should be able to get a non-compliant rule at one point. Did I do this correctly? I just want to make sure I did this. Port 21 to anything. Okay. It takes a moment. I believe this rule is constantly monitoring. So if I go to dashboard, rules, restrict common ports. So this rule is trigger oversized configuration changes and any configuration changes. So it should basically monitor all the configuration changes that happen on the things it's monitoring. So far they see compliant, but they should not be. Or maybe this is just eventual consistency. You never know. Well, in a moment or so, we will have a non-compliant security group, or one of the rules will be non-compliant, and we can have a look at why. But yeah, it's weird that it doesn't show here as non-compliant yet. Oh well. Did I forget to click save or something? Nope. It's like that. It seems like it's okay. So ALB, that's the name of the group, right? ALB web access. Inbound rules are 21. I have port 21 opened. And did I set 21 on my thing here? The rule ones. There we go. Eventual consistency, right? So we see that we have one non-compliant rule. So this rule itself is non-compliant. And if we go back and check the non-compliant resource, it's going to say, hey, this security group here is non-compliant, right? It's basically not. And if I go to resource timeline, this will actually show me the timeline of this resource change, right? So one of the things you can see here, yesterday, I made some changes to this security group. And what kind of changes did I do? I have disconnected a network interface from it. If I go up here, I can see that I have removed all these instances from the security group. Here as well, so it tracks all the changes to a security group, right? And today we can see that I have made this change. I have added, basically from nothing, I have added these configurations to my security group, and this is not good. So this thing has been actually detected. Hey, you know what? It's not good. And if you check the compliance timeline, you will see that it was compliant yesterday, but now it's not compliant. So how to fix this? Well, I can just go manage resource again, just plain old simple. Inbound rules, change it like so, and just remove telnet, because please don't use telnet. Excellent. So again, after a certain point, it's gonna come back again to just be compliant again. One of the things we can do is for remediation actions. So you saw me do this manually. Now there's a way to do this in a more smart way. So if you have been here for one of my last streams on the topic of Systems Manager has these run documents or automation documents that can basically execute either commands or API calls or whatever, right? So by using something like that, we can actually automate remediation of certain things, right? So if I would have here like an action that would revert the setting to something else or close all ports 21, I could apply it here and it would basically run it automatically or manually. So this is what we can do. So for example, if I would have automatic remediation set to a specific action, now I'm just picking up a random action here and click save, what it would do is it would basically, every time this would happen, somebody would add port 21. Within the window it detects this happening, it would execute this remediation action and revert it back, right? So, and you can also set it that it kind of notifies you that this happened. So you have a clear view that some change has happened, which you do not wish for it to happen. So this is both a security thing and a compliance thing as well. Okay, cool. So this is remediation, right? So this is the way we can do it. But not all things are covered with the built-in, what are they called? Config rules, right? So there are some things that we need to have a look into when it comes to custom rules, right? So Graham mentioned this in chat, but in essence, you can create custom rules as well, right? So again, see, this is not compliant, so it takes a moment or so for it to kind of funnel back into being compliant. So when it comes to custom rules, let's create a custom rule. How do custom rules work? In essence, all the logic, all the compliance logic you do via a Lambda function. So you have to have a Lambda function that will do something for you in this case and check a certain resource. And there's actually Lambda blueprints that do this for you. So they're already built in, you can just use them and you can kind of modify them, play with them. And even in my case, which I will show you is a super simple example coming from the documentation, is you create a custom rule, basically a Lambda function from a blueprint, and just use it to check if all of your EC2 instances are T2 micro. Okay, so let's do that. Let me go to Lambda. If I go here and Lambda. Let's create a function. So I'll use a blueprint. If you just do here and go type in config, and we can see I'll just use a triggered. I want to make sure that this rule is triggered by a change happening. So I'll do this, configure. I'll call it stream config custom role. So I will create a role. So there are already existing templates for these roles that might help us basically build the role for this, because it will give us all the permissions we need to have. So if I just do stream config custom role, right? And the policy template is this one. So if I just config, it's going to be config rules permission. Make sure you have that selected, and that should be sufficient for this case. Selected like that. There we go. Function code, as you can see, it already exists here. So it's a template. It's a blueprint that we don't have to literally create any custom code for this. Just accept this and create function. Well, this is happening. Okay, so the Lambda function has been created and we literally don't have to do anything here. Again, it's a very generic Lambda function, so it takes certain parameters. Now, I don't know what exact parameters it can take, but this basically I know Thursday, Gin. No, I think I drank it all. Yeah, no, I drank all of my tonic. So I have my gin, but I don't have my tonic. So I think it's not a pure gin type of evening yet. I have a lemonade, and I promise this is a lemonade, and I have a bad coffee. So, oh, that's sour. Okay, so this is a very simple thing to check for EC2 instance type, for example, or compliance for EC2. Again, you can modify this to do whatever you want. Again, you just have to return some data back depending on what you do. You might want to check compliance on third-party resources, or for example, your application code, whatever, right? Literally, you can create any kind of rule thanks to the flexibility of a Lambda function to check compliance. So I'm going to be using this. If I go back to the config console, like so, and click add rule, I want to create a custom rule. Click next and call it config stream custom rule EC2. Check if all my EC2 instances are T2 micro. This is a horrible rule. You should not have a rule that checks that. But yeah, so let me just copy my Lambda ARN. Paste it here. That should be fine. The trigger should be like this, right? And I'm going to only check only specific resources, so instances, right? EC2 instance. This is not going to try to attempt to check other things. Now, the one thing I need here is I need that string. It's somewhere here. Config rules. There we go. Yes. So we need to do this key here, desired instance type. And then T2 micro, right? This looks good. And add. Excellent. So now this rule has been created and we should be good to go, right? So now we should be able to check if our EC2 instances are compliant or not. But that's not true. We're missing something. So if you recall when we started, one of the things we did is we have selected what resources to monitor or what resources to record, we have only chosen EC2 security groups. So one of the things we need to go back is into settings and edit the settings and go here and add instance, right? Instance, if I could type, there you go. EC2 instance, hit the old save button. Give it a moment. Again, now it's going to be recording the content, so we can see that it's not done yet. So we just need to give it a minute. Actually, if we go to rules and we see that the compliance is nothing is happening, let's try to run the re-evaluation. So re-evaluate. Again, most likely nothing will happen until these EC2 instances show up. So, but it is showing up here. See, I have one non-compliant resource. Why is that? You refresh again. We have a whole bunch of things. We have 10 EC2 instances being monitored. We have 8 non-compliant resources, and we have 1 non-compliant rule. So if we go to this one, we see that these non-compliant instances are T3 2x large, right? So for example, this one is a T3x 2x large. So in essence, we have created a custom rule by using the blueprint from a Lambda function, and that blueprint or that Lambda function can be in essence anything, right? Again, if you want to check for third-party resources, you want to make sure your, I don't know, your GitHub repos are named in a specific way, or your Ops Genie users are created, or whatever, line of business application. The one I showed today, if your unicorns are properly created, right, have proper settings, this could be a way to test that. So it's not limited only to AWS. And this would be kind of a great way to get these things checked, right? So you don't rely only on certain things. Again, you're kind of limited to certain resources, unfortunately, within AWS, but you can make any kind of rule, right? So you can check for specific parameters of an EC2 instance that they have a key or they don't have a key, right? Or that they have specific volumes attached, right? So compliance is not always connected directly to security. Compliance is also anything. Literally, compliance can be anything you decide that is your compliance. Again, or sorry, governance is anything you have decided that it is. All right. So now once that is out of the way, I want to also talk about a few other things, right? I mentioned that, actually, no. I want to talk about conformance packs. So conformance packs are basically a collection of config rules. So this is not just a single rule. It's a collection. It's a bundle of config rules and remediation actions that basically you can set up or deploy on top of your AWS account in a region. And those conformance packs can be used widely. So it's instead of creating things manually like I did right now, you can have this big old conformance pack, which in essence is a CloudFormation template, right? So if I go here to deploy conformance packs, there's a bunch of templates. And here's one thing. One of the customers I talked to a while ago, they need to be PCI DSS compliant, right? So how can they do this with config? Well, there is optional operational best practices for PCI DSS. Amazing, right? There's operational best practices for CIS, or Center for Internet Security, right? So if you go here, in essence, you will see that this is a CloudFormation template that creates a whole bunch of config rules, from having MFA enabled for console access, for unused credential checking, right? So making sure that there are no that, for example, if you have a credential that hasn't been used for 90 days, it's going to flag those. So these are sets that have been created before by some people, but also instead of you creating manually all these things, you can create them yourself as well through creating conformance packs. So these are pretty good, right? So there is also some best practices for S3. Like there's a whole bunch of things here, config rules. It's pretty cool. Now, one more thing I want to mention as well is not conformance packs, but I want to talk about aggregators. So aggregation, this is what I talked about in the beginning. Using config on a single account is fine. but most likely people will be using it on multiple accounts, right? They will be using it across a fleet of AWS accounts or multiple regions, multiple accounts, whatnot, right? So the deal with aggregators is to funnel all this information into a single bucket, or, well, in essence, an aggregator is just a place where you can view all of these things, right? So you will funnel all of this config data somewhere, and they will be viewed through an aggregator. So let's actually try to do this. If we create an aggregator, so allow AWS Config to replicate data from source accounts into an aggregator account. So basically allowing config to copy the data from different other accounts into an aggregator account. So it will copy all the data, all the config data from different accounts into this one, right? So if I call this stream, and what you can do is here, either add specific accounts manually, upload a file, basically a CSV file with a whole bunch of AWS accounts, or just if you are part of the organization, it will basically just take the entire organization. Again, you can select regions, but what's cool here, you can also include future regions, which is amazing. So if any new region comes and it's being, config supports it, you will be able to automatically use config there as well, right? It will funnel that information again once more. Now, I don't have any accounts. This is my own account. Unfortunately, I have not prepared this because it takes a while to do this. But in essence, this would be it. This would be a place where you can kind of read and collect all the information from different regions. And again, there are not all regions are supported, right? So the regions that we have here are supported. So for example, unfortunately, the latest region, which is South Africa or from Cape Town, it's not supported yet. So as it comes, it's gonna be available here as well. Cool. So in essence, that is a quick look on config, right? I could go a bit deeper, but again, I really wanted to keep this stream in a very light approach. So just saying, hey, you know what, this is how you get started with config. This is why you should use it. And I think it's a very nifty tool, especially for people who have compliance requirements. Now, again, you may not know that you have a compliance requirement, right? So, and if you do, how do you check it, right? How do you know? If I would come and ask you right now, how do you know, or how long it would take you to figure out that no user group, not security group in your accounts, multiple, has port 21 open, right? So unless doing some API magic and understanding, going, scraping through all that data, it would take you a much longer time to figure out, right? How do you automatically remediate those things, right? You can have Lambda functions being triggered every once in a while just to check all of those things, which people used to do in the past. But with something like this, you can do it. For example, you can have, this is an example I've seen in real life, having a development account, right? A sandbox account. If you go there and you launch M6G32X large, whatever, huge instance, what it will happen, instead of blocking you from doing it, you have 15 minutes of basically grace period where you can use it, and once that is done, it's gone, right? So it can clean up those things for you as well. So it's a pretty useful tool. So that's very cool. And that's been it. I hope you learned something today. Let's have a look at the pricing. So I think this is also important because pricing on config, I don't know how it works. So let's see what the pricing is together. Let me actually move to the region where I am in. Let's do Frankfurt. So there's a price of 0.003 cents per configuration item recorded in your account for a reason, right? So configuration item is recorded whenever a resource undergoes a configuration change or a relationship change. So this can get pretty expensive pretty fast unless you control it. That's why you need to control what you monitor, right? So don't monitor all the resources. And if your security groups change every 10 minutes, this might cost you. So anytime a change happens, a configuration change on one of the monitored resources, you will be charged 0.003 cents per configuration. Now, when it comes to config rules, for evaluations, again, it's a 0.001 cent per evaluation per region, right? Again, as that number grows, as the number of evaluations grow, it's cheaper and cheaper, right? So also conformance packs, there's a cost of 0.012 cents per evaluation. Are there any additional costs? Yes, so the costs that are not directly connected to config are S3 and SNS Lambda functions, which are kind of like not intrinsically connected to the service in itself. So let's have a look. We have 10,000 configuration items recorded, various instance types, so that's a lot. 50,000 config rule evaluations across all individual config rules exist. 5 conformance packs, so this is all a big setup, right? So for configuration items, $30, config rules, $50, and conformance packs, $18. So that's $100 a month to give you this sense of control and understanding what happens inside of your accounts. And again, you don't want an auditor to come to your place of work and ask these things and you don't know, right? This can be a problem. And also, speaking to the auditors, you don't want to come to a customer and find out they don't have any of this, because both of your days are going to be too long, right? So this can help a lot. So again, be careful how much resources you record, and also be careful in which accounts you do this as well. So yeah, and also there's a pricing calculator we can do here as well. So it's a pretty cool thing that we can estimate the cost per month of this service. Pretty cool. All right. Is this still non-compliant? Yeah, of course, because I have my rule monitoring. And if I want to disable the rule, so I can actually go back, and I can, to remove a rule is just go here, delete rule, delete, and bye-bye rule. So it's going to remove that rule. It's no longer going to be checking for that. And once this rule is also removed, I can also remove the resource type EC2 instance to record. One important thing I need to stress this: do not go overboard. Monitor only the things you need to monitor, right? Understand what your requirements are. Don't go blind into compliance and configuration and governance mode without actually knowing what's required of you. And A, required by compliance or regulatory requirements. B, required by yourself, what you have decided to monitor. So make sure to do just enough, right? Do it just enough so you don't have to pay through the nose for these things. Again, very useful thing. I advise anybody to check it out, if anything. So yeah, if you have any, I'll actually move to my face. So that's been config. And if you have any requests for any future streams, please do send them my way. Next week, Monday, I can't remember what did I say I'm gonna do. I have a list somewhere. Not Monday, so Tuesday. I have something in plan to do. Yes, next Tuesday it's code build. So we're gonna have a look at the AWS code build. So I've been asked by people to check out some of the developer tools. So code build is gonna be something we have a look into. Way back we had a look at the entire code suite, but tomorrow we're gonna maybe just go a bit deeper into code build to see how it works. How can we work with it, and how can we make it a bit better? And next Thursday, we're going to have a look at another service that's great for compliance and auditing is CloudTrail. So stay tuned for that. Once again, my name has been Darko, and this has been a super fast look into AWS Config. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will be seeing you next week. Have a lovely weekend. Bye-bye.